Now, the first tool that we're going to use to retouch this image is the spot healing brush. And it's this guy right there. It's the first of the painting tools in the second section of the toolbox. And what it allows you to do is paint over imperfections inside of an image. So let's say what I want to do is paint over this freckle right in the center of this girl's forehead. Not that that's necessarily an imperfection, but for whatever reason, I want to get rid of it. Then I'd go ahead and select the spot healing brush. And if you don't see it, then go ahead and click and hold on that first of the painting tools and then choose it from the flyout menu. Now I'll go ahead and press the right bracket key a few times in order to increase the size of my brush. And I'll just go ahead and click on the freckle and release. And Photoshop paints over it with smooth skin. And if I zoom in on that spot, you can see that the skin even includes pores. So this is the image before I painted it, and this is how it looks now. Now, the spot healing brush is able to pull off this feat using two of Photoshop's most successful automated technologies, cloning and content aware. And I'm going to explain how both of those technologies work in this movie. So I'll start by switching over to this diagram right here. And we'll start with cloning. Now, the best way to understand cloning is to scoot two tools down here to the clone stamp tool. I'll go ahead and click on that tool to select it. And then I'll right-click inside the image window and I'll increase the hardness value to 100%. So we have a nice hard brush. And then I'll go ahead and press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to accept that change. And I'll press the right bracket key a few times in order to increase the size of my brush. Now, if I just start painting, Photoshop is going to warn me that I need to Alt-click or on the Mac, Option-click in order to define what's known as a source point. The source is the portion of the image that you want to clone. So I'll go ahead and click OK. Let's say what I want to do is clone the black sea over the white sea. Then I would press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click at the beginning of that black sea, like so. And that defines what is known as a source. That is the part of the image that you're going to clone. The part that you paint is known as the destination. So if I want to paint over the white sea, I'd start painting like so and watch what's happening as I do. See that little plus sign that's traveling along the black sea? That's showing me how the source point is moving as I paint. And then when I release, sure enough, I've painted the black sea over the white sea. Now, the paint stroke is pretty darn obvious, and that's because I was using a hard brush and I was strictly cloning. I was not blending the black sea into the white one. Compare that to what's known as healing. I'll just go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. And then I'll click and hold on the spot healing brush, and I'll choose the next tool down, which is the healing brush. It also requires you to Alt-click or Option-click in order to set a source. However, that job's already done because both the clone stamp tool and the standard healing brush share the same source point. So in my case, I don't have to Alt-click. I could if I want to, but I don't need to. But I do want you to see, if I right-click here, that I have a hardness value of 100%. That's very important because it'll allow us to see the big difference between these two tools. Now, if I paint over the white sea like so, you can see that it's blending in on the fly. And what Photoshop is doing is cloning this sea onto this one, and it's blending the brushstroke according to the data immediately surrounding the brushstroke. So it's using the color and luminance data together in order to create a better blend. Now, it's not a great blend, but we'll see in future movies that it can be outstanding. Now let's compare that to the spot healing brush. What I'll do here is I'll just press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. Now notice if I press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, I get that source cursor again. But if I click, then I'll get a warning saying basically not to do that. You do not need to Alt-click or Option-click when you're using the spot healing brush. So if you get this message, you can hit Continue or Cancel. It doesn't matter. And then just go ahead and paint over the thing you want to get rid of. In my case, I want to replace this white Z. And so I'll just paint as much over as I can here. If I miss something, then I'm not going to obviously cover it all up. And then as soon as I release, then Photoshop replaces that white sea, not with the black sea, because that doesn't match the area around the brushstroke, but rather with information that matches the area around the brushstroke. And Photoshop is figuring this out using this thing right up here. Notice this button up here in the options bar that reads Content Aware. You want to leave this button turned on because that's how this tool is going to perform best. And so what Content Aware allows Photoshop to do is two things. First of all, it's going to figure out the source material, what to clone, on the fly. It's going to do that automatically for you. And it's going to clone from many different locations all at once. So as you paint, Photoshop is figuring out what to clone on the fly. And to make this more clear, I'll go ahead and turn on this layer, overlapping Z's, and I'll click on it to select it. So imagine what I decide to do is paint over the black Z to get rid of it. But in doing so, I have to cross over the white Z. That will be interesting to see what Photoshop does twice. So up there at that diagonal and down here at the bottom of the Z as well. And then when I release, not only do I absolutely get rid of the black Z, but Photoshop tries to heal the white Z as well. Now, in this case, it doesn't happen to work all the way, but in your case, it might. If you're working along with me, you may get even better results than this. I'll go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. Let's say instead I want to paint over the white Z, which overlaps the black Z at 2 points as well, but I don't necessarily paint over everything. I miss a little bit of the top of the bottom of that white Z, and then I release. Well, that means that I won't necessarily heal the thing that I failed to paint over, but I will heal the black Z. And what's remarkable about this is if I undo, there was no black Z at these two locations. And so Photoshop figured out on the fly that it needed to put the black Z back into place. Also notice down here, this point where I didn't quite paint over the white, I've got a kind of split the difference thing going right here. So Photoshop is trying to merge this white area with this orange area, and it ends up getting this kind of dusky yellow. All right, I'll go ahead and zoom back out, and I'll undo as well. Now, if I want to get rid of both Z's, then all I need to do is paint over both Z's. And so I'll increase the size of my brush by pressing the right bracket key a few times, and then paint over the entirety of both Z's, and then they entirely disappear. And Photoshop then tries to heal the space inside of my brushstroke from multiple different locations using content-aware. And to really understand what's going on with content-aware technology, we need to check out content-aware fill, which we will do in the very next movie.